So about 8 years ago, my life descended into a chaos that I never thought was possible. And I didn't really have any guidance on how to survive that. I was bedbound for about 5 years, mostly bedbound, housebound for 5 years, mostly bedbound, and had about 35 ambulances. And I think one of the most challenging aspects, aside from just surviving that physical element, was doctors actually telling me, we don't know what's wrong with you. You're going to have to accept you're never going to know, and that this is your life from now on. In this video, I want to share what helped me survive, where I'm at now, and why I'm making a film about this issue. I have done other videos that kind of describe in detail how this all came about. The short version is I was on an anti-anxiety medication after I had a virus, which kind of knocked my lung capacity down to 60%. And I was unable to breathe. I was unable to breathe properly for a year, which led to anxiety. And the medication that I was on, after 4 years of being on it, I found out I should have been on it for a week maximum. So I came off it, not knowing it could have killed me. And my body went into a kind of shock, which led to this 8-year-long neurological injury that I have slowly but surely been making steps in recovery from. So here are some of the things that helped me survive. So number one was just kind of remembering and touching base with the dreams that I had and what I still wanted to do with my life, even though, as I say, doctors were telling me, you have to accept this is your life. I just wasn't going to do that. And thankfully, because of the access to information that we have, there are so many stories that I've seen, read, heard about of people surviving horrific things and still coming out the other side and building their dreams and creating the life that they want despite their circumstances. So I really, really held on to that. And I think just letting the imagination kind of do its thing and imagining what life could be and visualizing that was really important in enduring the day-to-day suffering that was going on. Number two was the support that I did have from friends in the community and other friends and one or two family members. And I think especially with people in the community that understood what this was like and where we could kind of validate each other's experiences and share the good and challenging moments was such an important factor in feeling human, feeling seen, feeling understood. When you kind of feel chewed up and spat out by the societal frameworks that put you in that situation in the first place, was a really important part of getting through this. But three was having a sanctuary. So I moved something like, I actually lost count, probably between 7 and 10 times during the 8 years of recovery. And once my brain had actually been injured, having been on the med for 4 years and going into something called tolerance withdrawal, I also moved countries. So I was living in France, I moved back to the UK, got a full-time job, but could only do that for 6 weeks. And then I just kind of ended up going from pillar to post, trying to keep a roof over my head. Because for the first 2 years, I didn't even know what was wrong with me. So there was no recognition of what had happened by anybody. And so it was just day-to-day survival. But all that being said, I tried every situation that I was in to just make it as much of a sanctuary as I possibly could. So as I say, for the first 5 years, I was pretty much housebound. So unfortunately, I couldn't go out on nice walks or go into nature or anything like that. But just sort of having plants or candles, even the fake candles, were kind of reassuring somehow. And like soft lighting. I love being in rooms with books. There's something really comforting about books and these kind of stories just waiting to be read. And yeah, just trying to make the space as cozy and unchaotic as possible to kind of counter the inner chaos that was going on with all the symptoms. So number 4 is, and this is something that I really think is key for anyone that's struggling or suffering in some way, that probably the very first thing to look at, aside from your initial safety, is nutrition. So there's a whole body of evidence now that shows that the gut is effectively the second brain. There's a huge connection there. So especially for those going through any kind of brain injury or TBI, looking at nutrition can be a fairly immediate and lasting significant change that can help. So cutting out gluten, not 100% because I didn't want to then become allergic to gluten. So I've never cut it out 100%. Cutting out gluten, sugar, caffeine I've not been able to drink for 8 years. Sadly, I actually really miss it. But yeah, it really wires up the nervous system. But gluten and sugar, once I started cutting those back more, I really noticed improvements in symptoms. But 5 is reading or consuming wherever I could stories of hope, not just for the benzodiazepine community, but just any stories out there that kind of showed that some sort of ascension through the respective hell that person is in is possible. And I think just reading stories like that or watching films, whether they're fiction or documentaries, just really gave me that sense of nothing is fixed and that there's so much possibility above and beyond our current circumstances. Number 6 is remembering how far you've come. And this can be really hard when you're in the moment. You're not necessarily looking back at where you've just come from. And to be honest, a lot of the times it was other people saying to me, but do you remember last year you couldn't even go outside for, more than 2 minutes? Or sit in like mild sunshine was too much. It felt like my insides were on fire. And so it's quite easy to forget what you weren't able to do at checkpoints along the way with this recovery, whether it's a few weeks, a few months or years. And so wherever possible, try and look at where you've come from, not just where you are and maybe what's ahead of you, which can feel daunting. Time is a very weird thing where I look back at the past 8 years and it feels like 80 years and it feels like 8 hours, paradoxically, all at the same time. So I would say as much as possible, reflect on the past, don't dwell on it. Don't get too anxious about the future and just keep moving forward every day, looking at what you're doing today and kind of make those micro improvements. And those are going to compound over time. And you can look back in 6 months' time or in 6 weeks' time or in a year's time and go, wow, this is how much I can now do because of those micro improvements that you're making. And sometimes it is just a case of holding and sticking with what you're doing, knowing it's the right things, knowing your nutrition is good, knowing you've got a good sleep, healthy sleep routine, and all these other things that can contribute. So for this, you might want to create a chart or journal or both, or write down some of your key moments with dates on, and then you can put it in a box or you can keep it digitally. I would say try and find some kind of tracking system. It doesn't have to be every day because that can feel overwhelming when you're dealing with any kind of situation like this. But anything that can just give you that evidence of where you've come from and you can reflect back on, I promise you at some point that will be really valuable, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment, even if it's just for personal kind of remembrance of where you've been. And it could just be taking a photo. I think there's an app called 1 second a day, it might be, where you can literally just take 1 second of a photo. And those moments are so valuable, and it's hardly any effort. So yeah, even just taking photos or videos on your phone, it's another great way of documenting where you're at. 7 is gratitude, and this is something that I'd heard a lot about and never really took seriously. I don't think I really gave it the value and respect that it deserves, because it almost sounds kind of too simple, but it's very powerful, and I think helps pull us out of our own heads and our own suffering, and takes us into this place of a healthier perspective. That then, if you're starting your day like that and or finishing your day like that, it kind of just wipes the board clean of anything that might have gone on that might have felt negative or painful, and just gives you this new frame of appreciation and hope to then begin the next day with. I also think it then does something in your brain that kind of makes you look for more things to be grateful for. And the more you do that, the more life actually begins to feel like it's changing for the better. I can't really explain it. I highly recommend just trying it, even if it's for a month, maybe 3 months, as consistently as you can. 3 things minimum a day, writing them down, saying them out loud, and just as much as you can, also just trying to really genuinely feel that gratitude. Number 8 is just remembering who you are at the core. So one thing that I realized at some point throughout recovery was I was feeling like more of a product of the situation rather than myself. And I think that's probably something to do with disassociation, depersonalization, derealization, all these things I don't really understand, but I think I experienced to some degree. And the more I kind of got back in touch with who am I without all of this? If this hadn't have happened, who would I be? And we're all to some degree products of factors that we don't have control over, from our DNA to our upbringing to circumstances that we then find ourselves in. But I think in between all of that, there's still this gap that is truly us and our individuality, our personality, whatever that's made up from. And I think that gave me a sense of grounding, and it gave me a sense of a kind of home within, if that makes any sense. So that whatever I was experiencing or whatever I was reacting to as a consequence of the situation, that I could kind of take myself and my association with that out of it and have a bit of separation, which I think allowed me to deal with it a lot more objectively, and also tie in that sense of identity with those future dreams, which then kind of reinforce that sense of hope and the belief in what was possible beyond. Number 9 is trying to reduce anything that makes you feel bad and increase anything that makes you feel good, which I realize sounds very, very oversimplified, but actually sometimes we don't pay attention to this as much as I think we forget the power that we have over a lot of things in our lives. We're all creatures of habit, and we accept a lot of what's happening just because it's what's already been happening, or certain standards or boundaries in relationships, including with ourselves, because it's what's already been before. So sometimes just doing a kind of life audit of very simply like 2 lists of what is making me feel good in this moment and what is bringing me down. And that could just be sitting down with a notepad for half an hour or an hour. It could be actually tracking it through a day or a week and having a kind of mood tracker where you say, this time I felt this way because, and you might not know, but if you're tracking it, you might be able to then identify patterns, and it might be certain environments you're in, or certain people that you're with, or certain thoughts that you're having, or certain foods that you're eating. You might start noticing these things that kind of fill us up or tear us down. And obviously the more that we can adjust the dials on both those things, then the better we're going to feel. So number 10 and 11 were things, as I say, I wasn't really able to do in the initial stages, but then once I was able to do them, I think really, I think they're both real catalysts for improving health and kind of getting to the next level of healing. So number 10 is being able to go outside again. So having the fresh air, the sunshine, being in nature, all of these were really, really powerful. And before I was really in a position to be able to do that, it sometimes just sounds kind of sad, but it really helped. I would just look at videos of like a meadow or a seascape or mountains, YouTube videos on my phone, and just as much as I could imagine experiencing that again, and imagine being in the sunshine, and imagine being back in France, and which is where I was prescribed the medication. And then with exercise as well, this doesn't have to be, and it certainly wasn't a case of going and training for a marathon, but even just, for example, starting with a 5-minute YouTube video on a yoga class, and then realizing a month later that maybe you could do a 10-minute class, or 2 months later. And these things really are healing in themselves, but also the validation that you're able to do them, and you can see the changes and you can see the improvements, reinforces that sense of confidence in yourself, and obviously builds towards more and more hope. Number 12 is creativity. So I am a firm believer that every single person is creative. We all have our own outlets and our own preferences. But it's just something that when you feel so powerless and so emotional, which is the normal human reaction when something like this happens, or when you're going through any kind of massive challenge, that to then have some kind of outlet for that and be able to express yourself in whatever way resonates with you, whether it's with a painting, a piece of music, cooking a great meal, photography, writing, whatever it is. And even if you're a writer and you're struggling to write at the screen, just recording into your phone, something like that, the self-expression and allowing yourself to do that kind of is this freedom from the prison that you feel like you're in. And it just gives you a taste of, in that moment, that sense of freedom, what that can be like in all areas of your life. And the last thing, which kind of links all this together, is just, as much as you can along the way, prioritizing your dreams and prioritizing your healing. And it sounds easy, but it was really challenging at times, and life can just throw up all kinds of distractions, and it can be easy to listen to other people and what they think is best, even if that's coming from a good place. Ultimately, I think by and large, we all kind of know what's best for us. And certainly with this whole medication experience, I look back and I think my intuition was probably pretty spot on for most of the way, whether it was listening to doctors who then ended up harming me, or whether it was listening to people saying, you should go back to teaching, or, I knew what was best for me. I knew what I had to do. And again, it does sound a bit cliche, but being true to yourself and knowing that you probably on some level know what's best for you to heal and rebuild the life, or build the life that you want to live. You probably know that better than anyone. So if you'd like to come along on this journey of healing and filmmaking, please do like, comment, and subscribe. And I'd love to hear anyone's healing experiences in the comments below. I think continually sharing our experiences together is really, really powerful. And yeah, you just never know who might really need to hear it. So thank you. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.